What's going on, everybody? Good afternoon. Time to break things up a little bit with another mock draft. I know you guys like the mock drafts, and let's face it, in the off season, that's a lot of what we do. We do mock drafts, so obviously free agency remains a focus, but we may as well throw another mock draft up there. And now that this is mock draft number 6. Now that we're this deep into it, there's going to be some repetition with previous mocks. There's only so much that I can do because there are only so many picks that make sense, especially in like the first and second round. And, I'm not going to do a mock draft with something that I don't like. Like, I'm not doing a mock draft where we take Jalen Milroe in the first round when I think he shouldn't even really be drafted. Like, I'm not going to do that. I know that some people out there would go for it, and I know that in theory, maybe it has some standing, but I'm not going to do it in my own mock. So let's go ahead and get underway here. One note is I'm assuming we get our expected compensatory picks for free agents we lost last offseason. I think it's Wagner, Damian Lewis, and was it Colby? Maybe there was one other guy. I think those were the 3 guys we got comp picks for. Second of all, I'm getting the rough estimated position of each player in the draft to know who we can get by looking at the mock draft database, NFLmockdraftdatabase.com. So if they're wrong, then I'm going to be wrong. But we have no way of knowing who's right. I may as well go with an aggregate, and mock draft database does really good aggregate work. Okay, so let's go ahead and open her up with a first round pick. And now that we have Kubiak, I think this one becomes much more interesting, and I think it becomes much more possible than some people were giving it credit for before. Tyler Warren, I think he fits really well with Kubiak's offense. Kubiak loves his 2 tight end sets. Kubiak probably looks at Tyler Warren and goes, he could be a really good version, a much better version of Taysom Hill. Like, I could get Tyler Warren, we could run trick plays with him because he has a good arm, and also line up in the backfield. He lines up in line. He can do it all. And I think this also alleviates the concern around losing Lockett, like I'm sure we will, because you are getting such a dynamic threat at tight end. Not having stud receivers up and down your roster is not that big of a deal anymore. So I know there's going to be some resistance here, but I think this is a distinct possibility that we as Seahawks fans need to consider and be open to, because Tyler Warren is really good. He's really fun. Kubiak would love him, and I think Seahawks fans would love him if he actually landed here. So that's my first round pick. Second round, I'm going with Jonah Savaiinaea of Arizona. He's a tackle there. He will play guard in the NFL. I have him playing left guard. Still might be my favorite guard in this draft. Again, that's me saying that, not knowing who's actually going to be a guard, who's actually going to be a tackle, who's going to be a center or whatever. But Savaiinaea is somebody who is projected to guard since the beginning. It's very clear he won't be able to be a tackle in the NFL. I think he's very good. And if you don't go guard in the first round, I think you're almost obligated to do it in the second round, unless you've sprung for a Tevin Jenkins type. So Savaiinaea is almost necessary. At this point, it looks like Donovan Jackson will be gone by pick 50. So if you're not doing that, Savaiinaea probably becomes the next best option for you. And he's probably a day 1 starter. He is probably going to just plug right in and go. And if he is good off the bat like people expect, you're cooking now. You've really got something. So Savaiinaea, you're stacking up your offense a little bit here, and this is more of an offensive focused mock draft because I feel like that's the side of the ball that is a little less settled. I know some people objected to that in previous mocks, but I feel like that's the side of the ball that probably needs a little bit more after the cutting is done. And speaking of which, I am going to go quarterback on day 2 in this mock, which is not something I'm going to do very often, but I do think that one of the scenarios where the Seahawks get a quarterback in the first 100 picks does involve Will Howard, quarterback of Ohio State. I like Will Howard. Grew on me as the playoff went on. He's got a pretty good arm, got some NFL caliber traits. I wouldn't take him until the 3rd, but I do like him better than Jackson Dart. I definitely like him better than Jalen Milroe. I like him better than most of the other quarterbacks that are being viewed as being picked around that area. Will Howard's my guy. If you could get him in the third round, I think that's really good. I'm worried the national championship will push him into like the second or even first round by some desperate team. But I think that he is a third round caliber player, and I'd be happy to get him in the third round. At that point, you probably cut Sam Howell, and then he's your backup until Geno Smith isn't the starter, and then Will Howard might be your starter. I don't love spending a top 100 pick on a quarterback that I'm not sure is going to become a franchise guy, and admittedly, I'm not sure with Howard, but you have to take a shot eventually, and of the shots you can take, Howard is my guy. So, yeah, third round, Will Howard, let's punch it in, and he's your new backup quarterback. Round 4, I'm going with a cornerback, Noel Williams of California. First defensive pick of this mock, which may not be very realistic, but I feel like this is the point where you start to maybe need to add on a little bit, especially if you traded Woolen. Noel Williams is a bigger corner, plays on the outside, very physical, really good coming up in run support. There's a lot of McDonald-like traits here that I think he will like. I think he'll pair really well with Devin Witherspoon, and we'll have two really good run supporting tackling corners on this team, which is what I think he wants, which is what I think we want. And I would be pretty on board with Noel Williams as a starter very early in the season. Maybe you'd have to rock with Artie Burns for a little bit just to let him acclimate, but Noel Williams could be a very early on starter for the Seahawks. Round 5, I'm going with Ricky White. This is a guy who's going to start popping up in most of my mocks, I think. I think he's just perfect for what we need. He can be an outside receiver. He can run deep routes. He can be a threat to force the defense to sit back, but you're not going to need him to do a lot with the ball to be impactful. And there's only one ball. And if we're giving the ball to JSN, we're giving the ball to DK Metcalf, we're giving the ball to, in this scenario, Tyler Warren, giving the ball to K9 and Charbonnet and AJ Barner, there's only going to be so many balls left for Ricky White. But Ricky White doesn't need to catch a lot of passes to have a big impact. He's a great downfield threat, great speed. He can play outside. To me, he's like the perfect fit. We're not going to invest a lot in him, but he's going to give us exactly what we need. He's going to become a guy that I think I end up drafting a lot. Just putting that out there. Next, we have another guy that I think I'm going to end up drafting a lot in any mock draft where we don't get somebody like a Kenneth Grant. I think Jamari Caldwell is almost a must because he is, I think, the most intriguing late-round nose tackle. He's slipped on the aggregate in the last several days. I don't know why, but Jamari Caldwell to me is somebody who could come in and maybe not play a ton of snaps, but could start in the NFL. If you support him properly with the players around him, I think Jamari Caldwell could come in and be that run-stuffing, middle-plugging nose tackle that you need on your defense to anchor things, and you only had to spend a 6th-round pick as of right now to get him. Now, by the time we get to the draft, I feel like you're going to have to have spent a higher pick on Caldwell, but we'll get to that when we get to that. So, Jamari Caldwell, nose tackle, I really like him. I think he's underrated, and he's becoming one of my guys. If you don't get a guy like Kenneth Grant, I think you have to do something like this. And round 6, another round 6 pick. This is the comp pick for Bobby Wagner, I believe. Let's get Tyler Batty, the edge rusher from BYU. Surprising amount of potential impact, I think, for somebody you're getting in the 6th. I'm not saying it's likely, but you take a look at the current arrangement the Seahawks have, where you're going to have probably Nwosu, Mafe, and Hall as your edge rushers going into 2025. There are plenty of potential snaps out there for somebody like a Tyler Batty to scoop up, which is why I've even advocated for spending a very high pick on an edge rusher, because there's going to be snaps out there for him, and unless you can go get somebody like a Jadeveon Clowney, it's going to be hard to address that need in free agency or trade. So Tyler Batty, I think he's a guy who comes in and gives you a chance to get something worthy of playing in a very late round from BYU. And final guy, final pick is going to be Francisco Mauigoa, linebacker from Miami. Kept an eye on him throughout the year. Really liked what I saw for the most part. I understand there are some real limitations, which is why he'll be lucky to get drafted. But for the 7th round, I think you could do a lot worse than Mauigoa. And we need depth. At the end of the day, we need special teams linebackers. We need guys to maybe kind of bridge the gap between the roster and the practice squad. We need guys like Mauigoa, not necessarily to play on defense, but to be there on the roster for special teams purposes and maybe end up on the practice squad, but that's fine too. There's nothing wrong with that, especially in year 1 when presumably we're not going to need him that much. Would hope not. If a lot of people get hurt, maybe, but you're hoping you can avoid a lot of people getting hurt. Okay, so that is my mock draft. That is mock draft number 6. A lot of offense for sure, but I feel like that should be the focus of this draft anyway. We're adding pass catchers. We did find a quarterback of the future. We added 1 interior offensive lineman. So that means you're going to have to go out and spend big at the other interior offensive line positions or get great development out of the guys that you have, guys like Anthony Bradford and Christian Haynes, which, I'm willing to take that gamble to an extent as long as you do what needs to be done at the other spots. If you give a good left guard to play to the immediate left of a guy like a Christian Haynes at center, then maybe, just maybe, that'll help his development. So I'm open to it, but you gotta make it, you gotta actually make it happen somewhere. All right, let me know what you guys think. I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. We'll do another mock draft in about a week whenever I feel it's appropriate. See you guys soon. Go Hawks.